Hello. It's been so long. It has been so long since I've sat down and done a talking head type video on YouTube. I can't even remember how to do it. But I think it's about time that we had a discussion about this one. And I gave you an update on her health, her reasoning behind plucking, and what her future looks like. So I'm going to jump straight into it. I don't want this video to go on forever. I realise that I ramble. I go on and I don't stop talking, and when I'm editing I could rip my own head off, so I'm going to try not to do that. I've written some bits down so I can stay on track, but this is the reason Shelby has been plucking for 4 years. So a few years ago I made this video right here, and that was discussing the fact that there was something wrong with Shelby and I just didn't know what. You can head back and watch that. It's a few years old. I knew something was wrong with her at the time, despite everyone telling me she was fine. And all these years later, it's taken so much testing to find out that actually something was wrong with her right from the beginning. Excuse the fact that I look so awful in that video. It was a mess. I'm going to try not to be emotional on this one too. So I've sort of composed myself. I've taken forever to wrap my head around what's been going on. So hopefully it's not like a blubbing mess or anything. So Shelby started plucking her feathers out, and she started with down feathers only, which is the really fine fluffy grey things under the collar against the skin, and she started plucking those feathers out first when she was 6 months old, and this coincided with the exact time that she started free flying. I have only recently made that connection. That wasn't something that I even noticed at the time. At that time, and from when I very first got her at the age of 4 months old, I brought her into my home, and she lived in a cage inside my bedroom, and she lived in that cage for about 18 months. She lived in that cage for a while before I upgraded her to an aviary in my bedroom in the corner. And then a few months after that, we brought Tommi into our lives, so she had a companion bird with her in that aviary in my bedroom. Now, the reason I brought Tommi into my life and the reason I got Tommi was because Shelby was plucking. I thought it might have been because she was lonely and needed a friend or a mate or another bird around her, someone else that was like her. I also thought maybe it had something to do with the fact that she was hand raised. Maybe she didn't know how to preen properly, and I thought another bird that wasn't hand raised, that was a bit more wild, might be able to teach her how to preen her feathers properly without ripping them all out, because I thought at first it might have been a behavioural problem. Unfortunately, even with Tommi in our lives, increasing her space and the free flying we were doing, Shelby's plucking was getting worse, and it just didn't seem to be getting better at any point. One thing I also struggled with was this very intense baby behaviour, this extreme I'm starving, I'm a chick straight out of the nest behaviour. And I really struggled with it because it came with some really loud honking, some really loud baby honking and baby behaviours. And I really struggled with that because I couldn't understand. I was feeding her so much, she was eating so much. And at first, as all free flyers do, the food is restricted. You sort of give food based on their training and based on their flying. And then, but I realised that actually that wasn't making any difference, so I started overfeeding her, and I mean I was giving her bowls of nuts, and this baby begging behaviour didn't stop. But on top of that, she just wasn't gaining any weight. She's always been about 900 grams, she's always been really light, she's always been quite skinny and small, and I just really struggled to get any weight on her whatsoever. So Shelby's free flight journey itself was really frustrating as well, because she would just land in trees the whole time. She would go straight from me to a tree, and she just wouldn't come back until we were ready to come home. She wouldn't do those big, long, beautiful flies that you see other birds doing. She wouldn't do those big, long flies that Tommi does. She wouldn't flock with Tommi. She wouldn't fly next to her. She would avoid at all costs doing anything excessive in terms of exercise. And whenever she did do a big fly, I did notice that she breathed heavily and she panted quite heavily, whereas Tommi, who hadn't flown for the first 2 years of her life, seemed to not do that. She seemed to physically, in terms of her respiratory health, breathe better. She seemed to feel healthier when she was flying. So then Shelby and Tommi moved out together into a big aviary in my garden in a log cabin that was built for them. And then after a while, Loki was brought into my life. So then I had the 3 macaws, and Tommi and Loki seemed to be just normal. Their behaviour was completely normal, but Shelby still was so babyish all the time, so honky. She still wasn't flying very well, and her plucking was getting worse and worse. I did more testing, and actually quite a lot of the vet tests, and the vet testing was quite invasive. I had an endoscopy done, I had an x-ray done, and this was all because I just knew deep down that there was something wrong. My script has flown away. I knew that there was something wrong. I knew in my blood and my bones that there was a problem that we were dealing with, and so many people kept saying, stop, just accept, she plucks, this is who she is, you just need to get over it. And part of me every now and again would be like, okay, I'll just accept that she plucks. And then the other part of me was like, this isn't normal though. Like, there's no reason for it, and all plucking has a reason, in my opinion. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. She was enriched, she was exercised, she was engaged, but still she ripped all of her feathers out, and she was getting balder and balder and balder. And for anyone that has a plucking bird, I don't think you realise the heartache in seeing your bird mutilate themselves, in seeing gaping holes in their body and blood on her feathers and feathers all over the floor. I'd go in the morning and I wouldn't even look at the birds first. I would look at the floor first, because I'm looking in and walking in and counting feathers, and it's really traumatic. So since that video that I did a while ago, Shelby's got worse. She still is the same weight. She just doesn't seem to ever gain weight no matter how much I feed her. She's still babyish, you can just see from this video already. She's still really wing flicky, honky. She's still really, they do this head bobbing, this slow head bobbing. She still does a lot of that. She doesn't make as much noise as she ever used to. She doesn't scream anymore. And all of this began to sort of paint a picture. So after that last video, she did have some really invasive tests for Bornavirus, which is a really deadly, awful disease. It comes in many forms and many strains, but Bornavirus is essentially a digestive problem, and some of the main symptoms are expelling whole foods that have not been digested, vomiting, and severe weight loss, and their health declines really rapidly, and it usually results in death. Quite a lot of birds can live with it sort of dormant, sitting in their bodies. But I knew that this wasn't Bornavirus, but I had very extensive testing done for that, including endoscopies and samples taken from the crop and stomach. But also within that endoscopy, biopsies were taken from her air sacs. And we discovered at that point, and this was about 2 years ago now, we discovered that there was inflammation of the air sacs and her spleen was enlarged. But her white blood cell count and sort of immune response seemed to be fairly normal. It seemed to be quite low, actually. Vets never seemed to give us any answers. They never seemed to give us any sort of, this is what it could potentially be. They just left us then, and we'd go home, and they wouldn't give any medication. They wouldn't give any follow-ups. They wouldn't ask us how she's getting on later on. They'd just do all these tests and then say, oh, there's nothing there. There's nothing wrong. You can just carry on. And so about 4 months ago now, the plucking was extreme. I took some videos of Shelby and I just thought, God, this has got so bad. So about 4 months ago, it was really at the beginning of summer 2024, the plucking was so much worse. But not only that, I noticed that Tommi was missing feathers on her face, and I freaked out thinking, how have all of her face feathers fallen out? So I sent both of them off to get testing. They both had an x-ray, they both had all of their disease tests, and they were due anyway, and they both had x-rays. I can't remember if I said that, but they both had x-rays and bloods and disease testing. And it came back that Tommi was completely fine and healthy, but Shelby's x-ray had some lumps and shadows inside her air sacs, which were concerning. The vet was really concerned about this because it was quite extensive, quite a lot of her air sacs. Oh, you're just wrecking everything now. So the vet was quite concerned about that. She wasn't sure what it was, but she said hopefully the disease testing and things like that and the bloods and everything will show us what that problem is, or why there are shadows quite extensively throughout her respiratory system. And then eventually, a few weeks later, the disease test results came back and Shelby was positive for Aspergillosis. Finally, I had a reason for everything. And I breathed a sigh of relief and was devastated all in one go. I wasn't aware of how devastating Aspergillosis is until she told me the result, and she told me to go home and do some research because she was rightfully concerned about Shelby's future. So it's likely that Shelby's Aspergillosis stems right from when I first got her and put her in my bedroom. Behind a massive wardrobe in my bedroom, and it was the opposite side of the room, but behind there, because I live in a really old house, was a patch of black mould. Shelby, can you go to patch? And, and the patch of black mould behind my wardrobe was probably about this big, probably bigger than my hand. It was undisturbed, it was the other side of the room, it was obstructed, but none of those things matter when the Aspergillus fungus is in the environment and in the air and a bird is breathing it in. And if you've got birds, you'll realise that birds have really efficient respiratory systems. And people say they have weak respiratory systems, which makes them vulnerable to things like non-stick frying pans and all the rest of it, and candles. It's not because their respiratory systems are weak, it's because their respiratory systems are strong and efficient. And so toxins in the air get passed and processed through the respiratory system really, really quickly. And anything in the air, in the environment that's going into the air sacs, is quickly pushed out into the bloodstream and throughout the body very quickly, which is why birds die so quickly from non-stick frying pan use and things like that. So this black patch of mould in my bedroom behind the wardrobe was likely to be the cause of her inhaling fungus from the environment. Aspergillosis affects birds that are already immunocompromised, immunosuppressed, weakened immune systems. It affects birds that are already sick or just weaker than other birds. And Shelby's always been a tiny bird. She's always been susceptible to everything. She's always affected by everything. And in the wild, small birds that are weak would be killed. They'd be pushed out of the nest. And I used to laugh about this, but I think Shelby would have been one of those birds. She would have, it's the survival of the fittest, and Shelby unfortunately has never been the fittest. She's never been a big, strong bird. She's always been small and dainty and petite and very, very light. And potentially she was already immunosuppressed. So since her diagnosis, Shelby is still, I'm really still struggling with Shelby's weight, with keeping enough food in her, with satisfying her. She's always hungry. She's still really, really head bobby and wing flicky. She's still, she's just always this fluffed up head, always looking for food. This has never changed. She's still really intolerant of exercise as well. And exercise intolerance is actually one of the key factors in trying to diagnose Aspergillosis, because exercise is painful for them. It's like asking someone with lung cancer to run a marathon. It's painful, it's not comfortable, it's difficult for her to breathe. So for 4 years now, I've been battling this plucking, these just health problems, this honking, this baby behaviour, this weight loss, this exercise intolerance. I have exhausted myself. I've driven myself into the ground. I've put Shelby through way, way more than I think she deserves. I've spent a lot of money on her, and of course she is worth all of these things. I mean, if I didn't care about her, I wouldn't do all of those things. She's worth everything, and getting the diagnosis is a positive thing, because now I'm aware and now I'm educated and now I can work around those things. But I'm tired. Most recently, in the last few weeks, I actually put a collar on Shelby, and this prevented her from plucking. And the reason I did this was because she's so immunosuppressed. I keep saying this wrong. Because she is so immunosuppressed, she's really, really highly likely to pick up infections. And she was plucking feathers, pin feathers, and leaving really large gaping bloody holes in her body, which was just leaving her wide open to the risk of infection. And I needed her body to heal. I needed her to stop causing further inflammation of the body, because plucking, that constant, like severe, really, really intense plucking, causes further inflammation within the body. It causes the body to emit a response. And I needed to break that cycle. I needed to stop that. And so I put a collar on her. And for 3 weeks, she couldn't pluck. It's not that she would have if she didn't have the collar. She couldn't physically pluck. And this, I mean, the downsides to wearing a collar were about as prominent as the upsides of wearing a collar. Wearing a collar prevented her from being able to move physically properly, and she couldn't fly. And I could really see her weaken. I could, her muscles began to atrophy. She couldn't fly properly. And even now, like, she's flying around this room and stuff, but she's weak. She sort of like crashes into the perches rather than lands on them properly. But she's getting better now that it's been removed. But that 3 weeks of wearing a collar allowed for a really substantial amount of feather growth. But because of the downsides, and having spoken to the vet who said long-term collar use is just such a no for birds, especially where it restricts flight, I decided to take it off, and I took it off in the evening, so that I thought overnight she won't pluck, she'll just go to sleep. Hopefully she'll sleep better because she hasn't got this thing restricting her. By the morning I went in, and there were probably in excess of about 100 feathers on her aviary floor. I wasn't as devastated as I thought I'd be. I think I prepared myself for that. I knew it would happen. The collar was for a break, not to stop the cycle, because I don't think it is ever going to happen. I don't think she's ever going to stop plucking. Sorry as well that the light is changing so much. I didn't realise how dark it was, so I hope you can still see me. Yeah, I didn't think the plucking was ever going to stop. I just hoped that she'd give herself a bit of a break, but she didn't. Since then, it's been about 4 days now. There's just more and more feathers every single day on the floor. She's removed all of her down feathers, and now she's back onto all of her pin feathers. Every day there's just hundreds of yellow pins on the floor and blue ones, they're the worst ones. I think seeing those bright colours with blood all over them are just the worst. But I mean, it is what it is. It's a symptom of her disease. It's a way of managing the disease. But obviously this is what she's like all the time now. So a little bit about Aspergillosis itself, because I want this video not to just be about me and my experiences. I want it to be able to help other people. If there's anything that can come out of this, it's that other people are aware of the disease and how to treat it, how to spot it, how to get early diagnosis, because that is the issue. That getting Aspergillosis diagnosed is so difficult. So I want to have a little discussion about what Aspergillosis is. And it's basically an airborne fungus. The fungus itself is called Aspergillus, and the spores from this fungus lodge themselves into the air sacs and into organs all over the body. And they form granulomas, which are sort of lumps of fungus which affect the body's ability to function properly. It affects the bird's ability to breathe as well. The granulomas themselves can block airwaves, they can restrict airflow quite significantly throughout the body, and they cause pain and discomfort for the bird when the bird moves too much or needs to breathe heavier because they've exercised. Birds with an already compromised immune system are at the highest risk of getting Aspergillosis. So if Aspergillosis is untreated for a long time, if it goes unnoticed for a long time and becomes chronic, it is devastating. It can cause a huge amount of respiratory distress and oftentimes leads to death. The granulomas themselves can release cells and spores that can actually traverse the tissue of the organ within which they're growing, which means they can spread throughout the body. So it can move from the respiratory system off into her body and start affecting things like the kidneys and liver, and can cause organ failure all over the body. Whilst treatment for Aspergillosis can stop the spread of the fungus throughout the body, it can't undo the damage that's already been done. Unfortunately, as Aspergillosis spreads throughout the body and causes damage, that damage can't be undone. Granulomas don't go away, they just stop getting bigger. And so if a granuloma is affecting a bird's ability to breathe, that one will need to be removed physically through surgery rather than medication given, because it doesn't shrink, it just stays as it is where it is. The other issue with that is that if medication does successfully halt the spread of aspergillosis, any stress overexertion in the future can sort of knock the granulomas or cause them to re-release active spores throughout the body, and the disease starts all over again. And again, you won't know that's happened until you start seeing the effects of aspergillosis spreading throughout the body. So unfortunately, if aspergillosis isn't caught early enough, it can be, and usually is, terminal. The damage that has been caused can't be undone, and the treatment for aspergillosis is very intense. It usually has lots of downsides and side effects of its own that cause problems, and the treatment goes on and on for months and months and months. Shelby's on, or has been on, 2 different types of treatment. She has been on an antifungus medication that goes in, like she eats it with her food, and she also is nebulized twice a day with a nebulizer. The antifungal medication itself is also, it causes the immune system to be further suppressed. So in a bird that's already immunosuppressed, the medication worsens that, it makes it even worse. So the medication itself can oftentimes cause further issues, and sometimes even just the medication can result in the death of a bird. But it's worth doing. It's worth trying for a short while, especially if you can prevent your bird from getting ill or coming across illness. I separated Shelby from the others because they obviously spend time around other birds, they're outside, and so by separating her, it was an attempt at keeping her healthy, almost like isolation. The other reason I had to separate with her was because she was plucking Tommy so aggressively, and Tommy's face was completely bald. There was a bald patch on her wing, like she just had no feathers, and it just looked so odd. And so I had to remove her from that because I just didn't want Tommy to ever feel like plucking or pulling feathers out is normal behaviour. Some of the symptoms of aspergillosis are as follows: an intolerance to exercise, this sort of baby wing flicky chick behaviour, weight loss, lethargy, loss of voice or inability to make noise or speak or vocalise in any ways, just any sort of effect to the way they make noise. Tail bobbing, so any of the tail sort of bobbing like this is a sign that the bird is having to try really hard to breathe and put effort into their breathing. And neurological symptoms like rocking or swaying, or the figure of 8 head movement that you might see your birds do. Some people think that that's a trick or like some sort of funny behaviour, but it's actually a sign that there's something wrong. And Shelby used to do it all the time. If you suspect that your parrot has aspergillosis, then there are a few things that you should encourage your vet to do to look into it. Aspergillosis is really notoriously difficult to diagnose. It's really hard to diagnose. You get a lot of false negatives when you do blood tests. So usually couple blood tests with other testing. I would ask for an X-ray or endoscopy. Blood tests, you can do next generation DNA testing to test for fungus in the body. And the X-rays may show up the granulomas, which is how Shelby was diagnosed in the end, because all of her air sacs had these white lumps. In Shelby's case as well, when we got her blood test results back, the vet at first was really confused because Shelby's blood, white blood count levels were really low, as was her sort of immune response. It was all really low, it wasn't alarming, it wasn't saying that she was fighting anything. And at first that was really confusing because her body was ravaged, her body is really damaged by the disease. And so the vet and I were trying to work out why her body isn't fighting it. And it's because her immune system is so weak and so overwhelmed that it can't physically fight, so it's not producing an immune response. It's basically given up and it's just letting the disease take over. That's also of concern. So if the blood results come back that there's no immune response and the white blood cells are within normal range, and but there's all these other symptoms, then that doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong, and further testing should be done. Thankfully, Shelby's impeccable diet, her health, her sort of fitness, my husbandry has meant that she's made it this far. If she had gone to another home right from the off and this had happened, she wouldn't be here today. The vet was really astounded with how physically fit she is. She said she'd never seen a macaw with such, like, he was so hench. I don't know how else to describe it, but so physically fit. Like, she said she was just pure muscle, and she was just astounded that this bird was so just, like, solid with muscle, which I was proud of and happy with. And I think that that's contributed to her still being here and still sort of trying to fight it and still carrying on, despite it having caused so much extensive damage. As for Shelby's future, I don't know what the future looks like at the moment. I'm just taking each day as it comes. I'm just grateful for each day with her. I think I'm just lucky to have got this far with her. And obviously I don't want to see her suffer. I don't want her to go through anything she shouldn't have to go through because I'm being selfish or like I can't let go type thing. So at the moment I'm just taking each day as it comes, spending as much time with her as I possibly can, making the most of each day because I don't know what next week looks like or next month or you know, this time next year. So obviously I got her in memory of my dad, like she was my first bird. I got her so that I had something in my life that I could look at forever and be reminded of my dad. And so it's just typical and ironic that my dad died of lung cancer, and of course she's dying of a lung disease. So it's almost, I don't know, it's not a sort of sick joke, but so many of you guys have been so supportive and so kind and so lovely. I've received such an outpouring, messages and DMs and videos people are sending me and links and putting me in touch with vets all over the world, and just general like messages of support, and I'm so thankful and grateful to everyone that has been so kind. I really appreciate it. Any updates or any changes or anything, I'll always put them on social media. So I've not come off of social media, but I've just sort of taken a break at the moment. But any significant updates I will put on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and on here. Shorts, YouTube shorts. So keep an eye on those different platforms for any changes or any updates. And just, yeah, thank you. I just really wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to everyone that has been so kind and has been so just thoughtful, and yeah, I just appreciate it so much. Thankfully, Tommi and Loki are really, really well. They're really close now. Where I had to separate Shelby because she was pulling all Tommy's feathers out, it meant that Loki and Tommi have got really, really close. And when I tried to reintroduce Shelby back in, she just wouldn't tolerate Tommi at all. She would attack her and bite her, and she was just really mean to Tommi. And so Shelby's now got her own aviary and the other guys have got their big ones. So they're doing so well and they're getting me through it, because without them, I don't think I'd ever go out. I don't think I'd ever leave the house. But having Tommi and Loki it means I can still go out and fly. It means I can still spend time with my friends free flying. It means I still get fresh air. It means I still am exercising. So yeah, they fly beautifully together. They're so good. They're doing so well. They're so well behaved. So I'm just really grateful that I've got those two, and of course Sammy. I think that's it for me for now. if you've got any questions at all about aspergillosis, then please put them down in the comments below. I don't want this video to be all me. I want it to be of some use to someone else. I want someone to be able to take something from it, because all I've wanted to do from the beginning is just help people. It's just to make people's experience owning birds better, and that's what I still want. Even if it's tragic and it's horrible, I still want it to help someone. I still want it to be able to make a difference to someone. I still want someone to gain something from it. So any questions you have about the disease, about aspergillosis, about care, about preventing, medication, what you need to expect from your vet, just anything like that, drop it down in the comments and I'll reply to everyone, because I don't want anyone to unnecessarily suffer like this. But thank you so much for watching. It's obviously been a hard one, but I appreciate you watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon with a less depressing update. Okay, bye.